Okay, Jonathan, today, thank you for conversation with me for 20 minutes. But as additional part, our YouTube member want to ask some questions. So could you answer their questions?
Absolutely, happy to.
Yeah, thank you. So for the first time, Mino, could you ask your question to Jonathan?
Okay. Firstly, thank you for coming as a YouTube channel. So I have one question for firstly. As a business person, for me, so I'd like to know what type of the characteristic of the Japanese people do you feel? So through your work experience with the Japanese professional. I'd like to know that at this point.
Yeah. I think as someone who grew up in the U.S. and more familiar with American kind of work culture, my impression of Japanese professionals I encounter are all very, very polite, right? Very, very genuine, right? Very friendly, right? Work very hard, work very, very late at night, right? So I remember when I was at KPMG, I had a Japanese colleague who from Tokyo that did a rotation in San Francisco, and I remember she saying like, "Oh, it's like vacation for her working in the U.S. just a lot less late nights, So I think that is my kind of impression. I mean, the other thing is, so my dad's from Hong Kong, my mom's from Taiwan, right? And I think just even working with other Asian culture, I think the one difference is maybe the culture that's a little different is I think the Asian culture is you like to jump into business very quickly, right? Whereas in the US, I think we value a lot of like small talk first, right? When you first started meeting, no matter how busy it is, it's hey, how's it going? How's your family? Right? It's so I think maybe that's one tip I think for Japanese kind of or in general Asian work culture, right? When you work with kind of U.S. customers or vendors, right? Like try to make an effort to talk about that personal aspect would be helpful. So.
Interesting. Thank you very much. So in addition to my question, the answer, so that so I understand that very polite and smart and hard worker, and yes, so that if do you have some suggestion to the Japanese professional who want to be more perform well? So that's based on this strong point. Any suggestion from your?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think even for me, kind of growing up in the U.S., right, but in more of a kind of an Asian culture household, right. One of the things I really had to learn hard is how to interview, right, during college, right, because a lot of times in Asian culture, we don't like to say, I did this, right? It's, we did this, right? So, I think that's definitely one thing I had to get used to, right? So there's the interviewing and then there's the in the job, right? Then it's like, hey, Jonathan, because I was part of the team, this is what I did, right? So I think not being shy and I get it. Everyone wants to be humble, but I think you still need to make sure other people know what value you bring to the table.
Right? Exactly. I know that most of the German people is a little humble.
Yes.
Too humble. So maybe we should be more emphasizing what value I can bring to the customer, your business.
That's right.
Okay. To say emphasize what I can do for the people. Okay, thank you very much. So one more question this is also related to your personalities. That if you face very challenging situation in the business or as business user, so what type of the mindset or the core value that you are having, you keep in mind in the daily?
Yeah, I think staying optimistic is definitely key, right? I mean, I think I always like to tell my team, right, like if there's no life and death situation that we're dealing with, then it's okay, right? Ultimately, it's about, at least in some of the businesses I touch, it's about, hey, do you make more or less, right? So ultimately, hey, we need to take care of the important stuff, right? Our mental health, right? Our family and whatnot, right? So that's, I guess, like how I face challenges is trying to stay calm and make sure you take it a step at a time logically, right? Because I do think there's never kind of that exact perfect answer, but there's logical ways to get to the right direction, right? And that's how I kind of do that. But I think that the other aspect is whatever you're doing, whether it's a job or a business you're running, right? I feel like if it's to a point that it's really stressful, like I like to ask myself, hey, do I really like enjoy doing this or not, right? And Shota knows this, but I jumped around a lot in my career, right? Jumped around finance, consulting, did startups, worked for a bunch of companies, and always jumped around. And finally, I think I found a career I'm very passionate about in business brokerage, right? And because for me personally, my parents were from Taiwan, from Hong Kong. They moved to Guam, right? U.S. territory. English is they're not fluent in English, right? Okay. So, but they ran small businesses. And when they ended up closing their small business, we didn't sell, right? We didn't know. Oh, really? And even as a middle school, high school student, I always wondered why, right? I'm like, wait, Guam's a small island, right? There's, some brand recognition, right? We had a couple of retail stores and there's only a few malls in Guam, so it's very small. So it was in decent location. So I always asked, how come we didn't do that, right? So that's one of the biggest drivers for me is helping business owners really capture the value they deserve because they spend so much time doing it. So kind of going back to your question, I think, if someone is passionate about what they do, right? Yes, there'll be challenges, but it will be, they'll be more determined because it's the value they get from the job or the kind of the utility they get from it is outweighs the challenge, so outweighs the stress.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the answering. Yep. Okay. We move to the Ayako's question.
Okay, thank you so much. So related to Mino-san's question, so I heard that you're dealing with the business with Japanese people and also American entrepreneurs who want to work with Japanese people too. Sure. And so like what kind of advice would you give to American entrepreneurs to be kind of mindful when they're dealing business with Japanese people in return?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question. So one of my favorite shows is Suits. Suits? There was a scene where Louis Litt had, Japanese clients, right? And he was wearing the Japanese outfit, right? And prepared all the tea, I think, or whatnot. So, I think that's key, right? Like to at least be respectful of the culture, doing research, right? I think working with any new partner or customer, right? To make sure that certain respect, right? So, even for me, growing up in an Asian household, when I lived in Taiwan for a year, there's a lot of things I had to learn, right? Like in the US, when we give business cards, it's just you just throw it,
right?
It's one hand, It's actually weird to do two hands,
Japanese,
right? So you kind of need to learn things like that, or since I know the drinking culture in Japan is really important, right? So I just learned in my trip to Japan last year that when you cheers, right, like the boss's cup is supposed to be higher, right? So I had no idea, right? So I think those are things where I would think maybe like if you're an American working Japanese folks, maybe they don't expect it, but if you show that you know it, right, that's a way to kind of to beat your competitors, right? Because you really show that you're devoted, right, and to understand, and I think it shows respect. That's right.
Okay, that's a really good answer. Thank you so much. So you have your parents who own their business, and that's help you keep you moving on the work you're doing, like M&A on SMB, like small mid-sized business.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think honestly, my grandparents also were small business owners, right? And I think growing up in the same house, right, seeing my grandparents, my parents, right, I think it really did influence my thinking a lot, to be honest. It's actually really funny. My grandpa always had this Chinese saying that says, working, you never get to the top, right? So almost like you have to start your own business to make it, right? And, it's funny, he didn't really value education too and whatnot. It's more about the sooner you can start your own business, the better, which is not very typical and, kind of the Asian culture, right? But I think it for me, it's about what's fulfilling. right? So I've also worked at large companies, right? I worked for a Fortune 10 company, McKesson, and I think it's really for me more fun and challenging to do my own thing, right? Just the yes, some people just don't like having a boss, so I think that's one part of it. But sometimes it's the challenge, right? You really get to solve a unique problem. I think I mentioned in another episode earlier that if in my mind, if you run a business that's long term sustaining, that means you're bringing value to your customers, right? And that's a really good feeling because to me it's like, hey, if I didn't do this, then the customers wouldn't benefit from this service, right? So that type of kind of value creation, right? Creating jobs as well, right? Is pretty, to me, kind of meaningful. And so as a business broker, right, we're helping people who, let's say built their business and continue the legacy, right? So when they sell it, we find a buyer that is equally passionate, right? Most of the time has more energy, right? Because they're new to the business and hopefully they can bring the business to another level, right? And on the flip side, we're helping, big people who want to be entrepreneurs, right? Have a very kind of clear path on how to sustain and grow a successful business, right? So that's why I think this industry is a really good fit for me.
Wow. You don't just care about the numbers or revenue that is going to be made. You actually care the passion and how the business is going to grow as a result of the M&A. That is very impressive as a business person. And thank you so much for answering the question. Okay, I think that's all from my side too.
So let's wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.
Go with the niche.